It's hard to believe, but sometimes the wild needs our help more than we realize. Have you ever wondered if your presence could make a difference in the survival of a species? We all know nature can be harsh, but the truth is, many animals face struggles we might not even imagine. Unlike typical rescue stories, this one is different. It's not just about saving a life, it's about earning trust and proving we're not a threat. While others hesitate, the choice is clear, and that's where we come in. Unlike traditional efforts, this one asks for patience, respect, and understanding. Remember, when the wild opens its door, it's not just survival at stake. It's a bond that could change everything. Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you. Please subscribe us. Deep in the heart of an isolated wildlife sanctuary, far from civilization, the forest holds secrets that few ever get to witness. The air is thick with the scent of pine and the quiet hum of life, but there's one creature that has eluded every attempt to be studied: the lynx. A solitary and elusive hunter, this particular lynx has been seen around the area for weeks, but every effort to track it has ended in failure. As a young wildlife biologist, I've been tasked with uncovering its patterns, trying to gain its trust without spooking it. Every day, I trek deeper into the woods, observing from a distance, hoping for a breakthrough. One fateful afternoon, everything changes. While quietly moving through the underbrush, I accidentally stumble upon a hidden den, tucked away beneath a thick bed of leaves and branches. As I peek inside, my heart skips a beat. There, nestled among the moss and earth, is a small litter of newborn kittens. The lynx, once so elusive, has become a mother, but there's something deeply unsettling about the scene. Her protective instincts flare as she notices me, her piercing gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that could only come from a mother desperate to defend her young. It's clear she's testing me, sizing me up, deciding if I'm a threat, or if I'm something else entirely. I spent the next few days documenting the lynx's every move from a safe distance, carefully taking note of her behaviors. She was a master of patience, never rushing, always calculated in her movements. But beneath that calm exterior was a fierce protector. Each time I neared her den, her gaze would lock onto me, unwavering and intense, her body tense with readiness. She didn't make a sound, but I could feel the weight of her eyes, a silent warning that I wasn't welcome. Her maternal instincts were clear. I could see the way she tended to her kittens, nuzzling them with her nose, guiding them to safety with a soft, deliberate touch. She seemed to know what each one needed, and her attention never wavered. It was both awe-inspiring and intimidating to witness. She was an untamed force of nature, and I was an outsider in her world. But as I observed, I began to notice something troubling. One of the kittens, an almost translucent creature, seemed to be struggling. It was smaller than the others, its limbs uncoordinated, its breathing shallow. It barely moved, its tiny body limp and weak. The other kittens huddled close to their mother, nursing, playing, while this one seemed to drift in and out of consciousness. It was clear to me that the kitten wasn't thriving. I knew what I had to do. I had been trained to help animals in distress, to intervene when necessary. But this was different. This was a wild lynx, fiercely protective of her young, and I had no idea how she would react if I tried to help. The thought of approaching the kitten and taking it from the den filled me with hesitation. The lynx had made it clear she didn't trust me, and I couldn't risk making things worse. Yet, the kitten's chances of survival were slim if I didn't intervene. I spent hours watching from the shadows, trying to read her movements, trying to gauge her level of comfort with my presence. But the longer I watched, the more I realized how little control I had over the situation. I wasn't in charge here. The lynx was. And no matter how much I wanted to help, I knew I had to earn her trust, if it was even possible. The tension between my desire to act and the raw, untamed nature of the lynx grew with each passing hour. Every instinct in my body told me to do something, to save the kitten. But the other part of me, the part that understood the unpredictable nature of wildlife, warned me that my intervention could disrupt the delicate balance of this family. The lynx had her own way of caring for her young, and who was I to decide what was best? I started to doubt myself. Was I truly helping, or was I just another human complicating matters in a world where I didn't belong? Would my presence push the lynx away, forcing her to abandon her young and endanger them all? Or would it help the kitten, giving it a chance to survive when it otherwise might not? The decision weighed heavily on me. The more I watched, the more I questioned whether I was making the right choice. The lynx had already shown signs of resistance, and I knew any wrong move could push her to act. But I couldn't ignore the reality before me: the kitten needed help. And despite the overwhelming tension, I knew I had to try. As I slowly made my way toward the kitten, my heart pounded in my chest. Every step felt like a risk, but the urgency to help this fragile creature outweighed my fear. The lynx, though watching me closely, didn't move. Her body remained tense, her eyes unwavering, yet she didn't seem to be preparing for an attack. Instead, she simply observed, her gaze as sharp as a knife. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much closer I could get without triggering her protective instincts. The space between us was thick with the raw energy of the forest, the weight of the lynx's silent watch pressing down on me. The kitten lay there, barely moving, its chest rising and falling with labored breaths. It was an agonizing sight. I couldn't leave it to suffer, but at the same time, I knew any sudden movement could push the lynx into action. I took a slow, calculated step forward, watching the lynx's eyes the entire time. Her body shifted ever so slightly, but she didn't make a sound. Another step. And then another. I was closer now, mere feet away from the vulnerable kitten. My hand trembled as I reached out, but I kept my focus on the lynx. I could feel her watchful eyes on my every movement, as though she was waiting for a reason to act. In a moment that seemed to stretch for an eternity, I knelt beside the kitten. My fingers brushed its tiny, cold body, and I gently lifted it from the ground. I felt a pang of guilt. Was I intruding too much? The lynx's eyes flickered with a spark of something I couldn't quite decipher. She remained still, but there was a subtle change in the air. My breath caught as I prepared to retreat if needed, but then, unexpectedly, the lynx took a cautious step forward. Her gaze never left mine, but her posture seemed less aggressive. She was wary, yes, but not hostile. My mind raced. Was she accepting my help, or was this the calm before the storm? For a split second, I considered backing off. But something in me urged me to press forward. I had the kitten in my arms, and I couldn't stop now. The lynx's steady, calculating gaze continued to track my every move, but she made no further advances. Tension hung thick in the air. I could hear my own heartbeat, and I could feel the lynx's piercing eyes still locked on me. The moment felt like it could snap at any second, but it didn't. The lynx stood there, watching me, her defensive posture softening just enough to allow me to continue my delicate work. Every instinct told me to retreat, but the decision was clear: I had to take the chance. I carefully cradled the fragile kitten in my arms, feeling its tiny body shiver against my palm. Every instinct screamed at me to be gentle, to be slow. The lynx's eyes remained fixed on me, her gaze intense, but there was no aggression in it. Not yet, anyway. My thoughts raced as I moved cautiously back toward the den, each step taken with the weight of what I was doing. There was no turning back now. As I approached the den, the lynx shifted slightly, her body language still tense, yet she didn't make a move to stop me. She watched, calculating, waiting for a reason to either allow me to continue or drive me away. I couldn't predict which it would be, but I had no choice but to hope. Carefully, I placed the kitten back into the den, where it nestled close to the others, weak but alive. The other kittens stirred, sniffing at the newcomer, but they were too young to understand what was happening. It was up to the lynx now. The lynx did not immediately act. For a long moment, she simply stared at her weakest kitten. Her eyes softened ever so slightly, and I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something, recognition, perhaps. Her gaze shifted to me, and then, slowly, she stepped back, retreating into the shadows of the den. She didn't approach or protest, but she didn't leave either. She allowed me to remain close, but the distance between us was still palpable. Days passed. I continued to observe from afar, stepping closer each time with cautious optimism. The kitten, now named Aspen, slowly began to show signs of improvement. It began to nurse properly and gain weight, its once feeble limbs strengthening day by day. The lynx watched from a distance, but as the days wore on, she seemed to relax just a little. I wasn't sure what had changed, but there was a noticeable difference in her behavior. She wasn't so on edge anymore. It wasn't a sudden shift, but an easing of tension, a silent understanding between us. I had never anticipated this kind of bond forming. I had never expected the lynx to accept my presence, let alone trust me with her young. Yet, week by week, that trust seemed to grow, ever so subtly. She no longer flinched when I approached, and though she always kept a wary eye on me, her aggressive stances lessened. It was as if she had come to understand that I wasn't a threat. I wasn't here to harm her or her kittens, I was here to help. As the kittens began to grow stronger, I found myself spending more time near the den, watching them play, watching them grow. They were curious little creatures, quick to explore and test their boundaries. Aspen, once the weakest, was now the most adventurous of the bunch, darting out of the den with the other kittens, leaping and pouncing on fallen branches. The lynx would watch from the shadows, her golden eyes following every movement, yet never intervening. She had learned to trust me enough to know that I wasn't a danger to her family. I, too, had grown attached to these wild creatures. The fierce, untamable lynx had become more than just an animal I studied. She had become a symbol of survival, of resilience, and of the delicate balance between the wild and human intervention. I had come to respect her in a way I couldn't have imagined before, and, in return, she had begun to accept me as part of the fabric of her world. Over time, the bond between us deepened. I could feel it in the way she would no longer flinch at my presence, the way her gaze held less suspicion and more understanding. She had learned to trust me, and I had learned to trust her in return. There was no grand gesture of affection, no overt signs of friendship, but there was an unspoken connection between us. We were no longer strangers. We had become allies, united by the fragile lives we were both trying to protect. As I stood at the edge of the sanctuary, watching the lynx and her growing kittens retreat into the dense underbrush, a sense of awe washed over me. What had begun as a simple act of intervention had turned into something far deeper. The relationship I had built with this wild creature was not one of domination or control, but of mutual respect. I had come into this world with the intention of saving a life, but what I didn't expect was how much I would learn from the lynx in return. The bond we had forged over those long weeks wasn't based on words or gestures, but on trust. It was a silent understanding between two species that, despite their differences, shared a common goal: survival. I had stepped into her world as an outsider, but over time, I became a part of it, not by force, but by showing up, day after day, letting her decide if I could be trusted. And she had chosen to trust me. That, in itself, was a powerful revelation. I realized then that conservation wasn't just about rescuing or protecting, it was about respect. It was about understanding that every animal, every creature, is a part of a delicate ecosystem, and that the humans who intervene must do so with care, empathy, and patience. The lynx, in her own way, had taught me this. As I left the sanctuary, I understood that this experience had changed me. I had come to protect, but I was leading with a deeper awareness of the complexity of nature. Human intervention, when done with the right intentions, can be an act of partnership, not a rescue. It was a lesson in humility, one that I would carry with me always. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.